Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be a spoiler-free review of Mike Thorn's Darkest Hours. Just a quick disclaimer before I hop into this review, I was kindly sent an ebook by the author to review. So I was very thankful and very excited for this opportunity. However, my review is my own and I wasn't under any obligation or pressure to say specific things about this book, just read it. So I was really excited to get this opportunity. So diving into this book, Darkest Hours Extended Edition is actually a reprint from the original Darkest Hours short story collection by Mike Thorn. This extended edition does have extra content in it, and it has not only 16 short stories that are fiction short stories, but it also has a variety of criticisms or essays about horror fiction in general at the end. I honestly haven't seen that blend of fiction and nonfiction in one bind-up before, so that was really neat. So like I mentioned before, there are 16 short stories, and if you are a fan of body horror, cosmic horror, sort of supernatural, bizarre sort of horror scenarios, short fiction, then you are really going to enjoy this one. I think it is a very good blend of all the subgenres that I mentioned. Now, if you are a person who does not like body horror in particular, this is not the short story collection for you. The body horror in here starts from the very first short story, and it is very intense and graphic, and there are a lot of scenes in here that are just so visceral and very much see them in a physical sort of horror movie type of way. Mike Thorn does not shy away from descriptions of grotesque things, so if you do not like that sort of thing, I would skip this one. This is not only just body horror, but it's bizarre body horror. There are things that I never even contemplated being in the realm of body horror in here, as well as just like a lot of very disturbing imagery. I really enjoy body horror. It is something that is very effective for me and just a subgenre that I tend to really enjoy. However, I do know it's not for everyone, so if you are a person who doesn't really like that, maybe not the short story collection for you, but if you do, you are going to find some body horror in here. One thing that I did really enjoy about this collection is that there are author's notes at the end of each single short story, so you could kind of see the influences behind the short stories and some of the explanations of how these short stories came to play, and I really enjoyed them because reading this collection, you can tell that Mike Thorn loves horror, not just horror fiction in that printed sense, but also horror movies, and there are just so many nods, so many references. It almost felt like if you read several of Paul Tremblay's books, for example, you'll definitely see within the names of different characters like very subtle nods and Easter eggs to horror classics that you can really just tell there's a whole lot of love put into the genre in total. So I really enjoyed seeing that. A lot of times I would read a story and be like, wow, this reminds me of this, and then read the author's note and it was definitely inspired by that, which was really fun. And I don't mean that they reminded me of other things in a bad way. These are very much original short story horror tales, but it was just really fun as a horror fan seeing all of those connections and just enjoying nods to different franchises, different horror authors, different horror movies in general. That was really fun for someone if you do like horror in terms of movies and TV shows, not just books. I think that'll be really fun for you as well. I have mentioned on the channel before, I am someone who normally goes for longer stories and I prefer longer books over short fiction. However, I think short stories work really well within the realm of horror, as well as these stories are very short. Some are only a couple of pages long, and I really do feel like that's the ideal format for horror short stories because there's just enough time to build up the premise, have that shocking horror thing happen, and then the story wraps up. So I really enjoyed that. If you are a person who does like longer format, just know that these stories are a little bit on the shorter end, but I think for the type of horror that was being described, that sort of, especially for the cosmic horror stories and the sort of Lovecraftian, bizarre sort of horror themes, I think the length worked really well in the favor of this format, as well as there were several short stories that had almost like an urban legend feel to them. So again, I thought that worked really well for a short story, where if you're trying to create like a new urban legend or something like that, it's definitely a story that is better suited to the short story format rather than a full book. So like I mentioned before, there are 16 short stories, and with any, I feel like, anthology collection, there are definitely going to be ones that you like more than others, and I would definitely say these do feel very cohesive as a collection. They all kind of have the same sort of vibes and feeling, tending to go go, like I've mentioned before, with that body horror, with that cosmic horror. As the really cool new cover suggests, there's a lot of stories that felt very, very reminiscent of movies during like the 80s. So I really enjoyed that feeling of that collection. Again, I think this is one, if you're not a horror reader, but you like horror movies, I think this would be a really good collection to kind of dive into reading horror, because it does have a lot of nods to things, if you are a really hardcore horror movie fan, that you probably have seen before. So it's not very intimidating to pick up a book and kind of see some of the same tropes, just done a little bit differently. I definitely want to keep this review very spoiler free, so I'm not going to talk about every single of the 16 stories, but I will talk about my standouts. So quickly, just going over my 3 favorites. I really enjoyed the Auteur. This is for anyone that's like nostalgic for like that blockbuster sort of feel, sort of movie horror experience. I, for one, am like very late on the end of like millennial culture. I was born in 95, however, I do still remember blockbusters. And for me, my big blockbuster horror experience was going on Friday nights with my family, picking out a family movie. I was not allowed to rent horror movies at the time. My parents thought they were too scary for me, which, you know, good on them for some of the titles I was looking at. But I would remember it was like the younger child to tween experience where you'd see a really creepy horror cover, you'd pick it up, read the synopsis, put it back, and just kind of just that blockbuster feel. Even though this isn't necessarily solely to do with a video store, this definitely had that blockbuster sort of nostalgia feel that I really enjoyed. And The Ring is one of my favorite horror movies, and I feel like if you like The Ring, you'll like what that short story has to do in terms of horror. Another standout was Lucio Schulter. This one was very bizarre. It almost felt like an adult Goosebumps book. Just in the whole setup, the bizarre premise, and then even down to the end felt like a Goosebumps book, but for adults. So if you enjoyed reading Goosebumps as a kid, this isn't the only story where I felt like had those vibes, but I really enjoyed this one. It really came out of left field. It was very bizarre body horror, and I really enjoyed it. It was very creepy, worked for me. And then my favorite short story out of the collection was Remembering Absence, and this is not as visceral in terms of body horror or shock or gore. This one was definitely a little bit more towards the existential side of horror, a genre of horror that I do really like as well, where it's not so much about the shock factor or the scare factor, but it's almost like horror dipping into, okay, like now I just feel really sad. I thought that one was very beautifully written. One of my favorite things about horror is that the genre contains multitudes. It's a lot more dense and deep, and it can go into some really dark and really beautiful, lovely places at the same time. And so I really enjoyed that one. You could tell, especially that story was written from a very personal place, and I just really felt like you could feel it in the writing. So that by far was my favorite short story out of this collection. I did also enjoy looking through the short essay collections. I did kind of skim some of them because I hadn't actually seen the movie or felt like I had seen the movie recently enough to read all of them, and I didn't want to spoil some of the movies that I hadn't seen while reading those collections. But from what I read, I did really enjoy those as well. I'm definitely a person who I really enjoy podcasts of movies. I really tend to enjoy like podcasts or even like videos on YouTube discussing movies, especially horror movies. And if you like analysis of horror movies, I also recommend these. I thought it was a very nice like supplemental reading material to the short stories that were in here, especially since, like I mentioned, the short stories definitely as a collection had a lot of nods to famous movie tropes and famous movies, movie directors. So I feel like that's a really fun reading experience, reading all the short stories. And then at least for me, this collection really got me in a horror movie mood. So reading the criticisms and essays about horror movies at the end of this collection, I thought was a really good cohesive piece, putting them all together. Overall, I really enjoyed this collection. It definitely made me want to binge a bunch of horror movies, especially since some classics. And thank you so much again to the author Mike Thorn for sending me this short story collection. I had a blast reading it. I'll definitely be leaving some links down in the description bar below so you can check out Darkest Hours for yourself. And with that being said, that is going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, let me know your favorite horror movie at the moment, because like I said, I'm definitely in a horror movie mood after reading this collection. Subscribe to my channel for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!